Welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab, sponsored by CPA Practice Advisor, with your hosts, Randy Johnston and Brian Tankersley.
Welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab podcast. I'm Randy Johnston with co-host Brian Tankersley. This year has been a release year for a lot of AI products, and the AI CPA's accelerator cohort this year, which was the seventh one, had a variety of products that were AI based. You had to actually have an AI component or you could not be invited to this year's cohort. Well, it turns out that a product by the name of Laurel was in this year's cohort, and I thought it was worth speaking to you about because Laurel is a timekeeping product that uses AI for passive timekeeping. Now, Brian, I know you've talked about passive timekeeping with a variety of products before, and you have used passive timekeeping for a long time, as have I. And I understand the emotional argument about, oh, you shouldn't be billing by the hour. And I'm okay if you do flat rate billing, but I do like to keep track of my hours from a costing basis. Laurel is venture backed. They have about 55 million to date that we're aware of. And they've been building their AI for quite a while, 5 years or more. And they got their start in law firms, but they then went into Ernst & Young and several other alliances. So, when you look at the Laurel approach, they're really trying to break through into a variety of industries. Now, they have, made alliance relationships with BDO, with the Aprio Group, which, is where a lot of the RSM firms landed, and they're working with ITA. But most importantly is I think they are headed down market because of timekeeper efficiency, where you can get improved staff experience and time savings and so forth. What else would you want our listeners to know about Laurel, Brian?
Well, let me just first say, from a passive timekeeping perspective, the beautiful part about it is that it tracks things in the background and does and really keeps up with all the files you've touched. And it really is going to have the most improvement, I think, on your billability for your managers, partners, directors types, as opposed to your staff, simply because your staff are more task oriented. And there's so many different things that you have to touch as a manager, partner, director in an organization. But with them, they, again, the thing that I like about it is about passive timekeeping and Laurel as well, is that it gives me an insight into how I'm actually spending my time as opposed to how I think I'm spending my time. So it may not affect how much I charge the client in the short term, but from my perspective of staying on target and not getting diverted and not, giving somebody that's paying for a copper level service, platinum level service, and giving somebody that's paying for platinum level service, copper level service, keeping those two separated, I think, is a important thing. I do find that it helps me track the number of billable hours, and it helps keep those numbers up to where they need to be. So I know when I'm working, when I'm not working, so I can redirect myself with the data as opposed to having to get somebody else to manage me.
Yeah, and as it turns out, we'll talk more about how it watches applications that you're running and how it tracks that. But, for years, Brian, I have said that if you keep track of your time daily, you can have as much as a 25% uplift in fees. Laurel has slightly different numbers, but still it is important because having an intelligent timekeeping solution helps you bill more time, taking less time, or it gives you the cost basis without any real effort. And realistically, just like you and I right now recording podcasts, it can watch, and you may not exactly remember what you were doing in this window, but Laurel will identify this window you were doing this thing. It's like, oh, sure, I was doing this. Or you wander down the hall to have a discussion with a colleague, and all of a sudden everything's inactive, but you can see that you were out of your office for 17 minutes. And again, I'm not trying to track every little minute. It's just like, what did I do with that 17 minutes? And if you're thinking about it just once a week, it's so easy to drop those time slots. So it keeps track
And,
of your. Go ahead, Brian.
and the other thing is that even though you're not married to rate per hour, I think rate per hour, even in the value pricing world, is an important thing to have, because while it's not a, the downside to hourly billing is that you put a maximum value on what you do. The flip side to having to tracking the time here, the thing that I think is advantageous is it tells me when I'm throwing money down a rat hole and I need to rethink the relationship with somebody, or I need to reprice that engagement going forward if they're going to use this much of my resources. So I think I think, it gives you, because, again, I don't know about you, Randy, but when I'm pricing engagements, I have in the back of my mind, it's going to take me X hours to do this, and the value of it is this, and this is what it's going to take. And if I get a surprise and it takes twice as long to do something and it's on a fixed price, I need data so I can factor that into the next bid, so I don't make the same mistake over and over.
Yeah, or, as we've been coaching many firms, actually issuing a change order to say, look, we came in with this expectation, it's that, therefore I need to have additional fees. And we're seeing that successfully done by a lot of CPA firms in the market today.
And it's much easier to have that conversation, to be confident in it, if you have data. And just this passive data, again, I'm not suggesting that you get married to this data and that you treat this as if it's chiseled into stone or something, but it is another data point for you about how you've spent your time and what you've worked on, and what parts of this job took what tasks took so much time in here, so that you can have a better discussion about how to run the job better next time.
Yeah, so notice that Laurel is not only tracking your online work, but also tracking your offline work. And frankly, it helps you organize so you can work faster along the way. And the more you use Laurel, the smarter it gets. So, how does Laurel basically go about this? Well, it has a thing they call the Laurel Assistant that collects and captures all your digital footprint, all the applications that you're using. And then it uses AI to translate that into the way that we speak and what we're doing with it. It does a visualization that allows you to see how you've been using your time. We Laurel's claim is that they can save 1 to 2 hours per week per person in timekeeping. And then they do the analysis and they integrate into your existing tech stacks so you can actually see, what you're working on and how to bill. And it really improves your billing time speed because it eliminates the time lag. Again, for 40 years, I've probably been a proponent of hotel billing, delivering the billing when the work's completed. But, many firms are still billing, a few days afterwards or at the end of the month and so forth. So when you're using these techniques, Laurel's claim is that you might see anywhere from a 4 to 11% profit uplift. So, Brian, in terms of how Laurel keeps track of the work, what type of things go on here?
Well, again, there is an assistant. There's a Laurel assistant that is basically running in the background all the time. And it's just watching what you're looking at and what you have going on. So if you're in a meeting and you're switching over to look at memes or email or other things like that, it will actually capture the thing that is the active window that you're working on, as opposed to this. So that time where you were working email or doing other things like that in the middle of the meeting about the new childcare plan that you will never have a child in, can be quite valuable. They have in their user interface, they actually have a calendar, and they will actually go through And again, there's a slight lag in between when the time is incurred and when it's recorded, but it actually gives you a calendar and some other insights. It shows you your timesheet, and then your online captured work is shown in a right pane. And so the idea behind it is that you can compare the stuff you worked on in the rightmost pane, the right third of the screen, as it were, against your timesheet, which is the middle pane in this one third, one third, one third user interface. It also integrates with most of the apps you use. So Outlook, email, Outlook Calendar, Teams calls, Zoom calls, research websites, applications, other things like that. And so it will actually go through and recognize clicks, keystrokes, and scrolling. Again, and it tracks the active window. So it tracks what you're actually doing, not what you want people to think you're doing. Okay. And again, this isn't a spying application necessarily, but it does show you how much time you're spending on things. And so as an example, when I was a CPA firm tech manager, one of the, and this was, I guess, this is in the dawn of instant messaging way back in the early part of the 21st century. I had a couple of folks that spent all day long on AOL Instant Messenger chatting back and forth with each other during the workday. And I would have loved to have known how much time they were actually burning making that the active window, thinking about how they were going to chat with each other as opposed to doing the work. And so it's again, the idea here is that this is the mirror that is telling you the truth of where you are right now with how you spent your time, which I think a lot of us need.
Yeah, and if you think about having so many applications open, this product's tracking where you're active, and then it turns it into a work history, right? So you can see all the online activities that Laurel captured for you, and they're in chronological order. And that includes the emails and the calls and the documents and other items that are automatically listed for potential time entries there. So the work history is kind of interesting. And then beyond that, it also does work groups. So it actually will let you identify a collection, a project, an engagement, if you will, to collect a lot of those activities together. So emails that are in the same thread, or a document that you started in the morning and returned to later, or where you've got the same client name involved. It'll collect that stuff for you automatically together, which is kind of a big deal. And then once it's collected all that together, you can review what has been collected, modify it as need be, and release the entries to really confirm and submit your time. So this whole mechanism is actually very nifty in terms of the way that it works. But then the question might be, okay, that sounds like a lot of time trackers that I've used. How's it using AI? Well, first, it's doing narrative and description text predictions. It's doing work code predictions for activity phases and tasks, and it's doing engagement and client predictions along the way. Now, again, when you're first using the system, it's not super accurate, but the more you use it, the better the predictions are inside the platform. So those narrative predictions will let you begin typing, and it will actually make a guess of the project engagement client and so forth that you're working on. And then it will fill in from recent entries that you've made, as well as entries you've made in the past. So those types of work code, billing code, engagement, client predictions are all, I think, pretty big helps to, doing the timesheets more readily and easier. Now, it turns out that they also have dashboards that watch the back end of this. So, Brian, just like you were talking about when you were a tech manager, being able to see that, this is a little big brotherish sounding to me because it is a firm-wide dashboard. But, the Laurel positions it as billing leaders. They've had so much experience in legal. Legal really has more of a culture of this, but it does show the activities, including, baseline billing and how you're doing compared to peers, and then the business impact. So, Brian and I wanted to make sure that you had a bit of a flavor on, frankly, the first new major breakthrough that we've seen in a billing platform in a while. AI based was interesting, but just ease of use was interesting. And what I think some of the users are saying, I believe is pretty true there, Brian. I'll never go back. If I leave the firm, I'm going to go acquire Laurel and use it myself. Other
And
parting thoughts there, Brian, for our
the
listeners?
thing I would suggest to you about passive time tracking is that, and I agree with this person on the sentiment, by the way, I will never go back. The thing that passive time tracking has done for me over the 10 plus years I've been using it is it really goes in and removes all the anxiety I have about capturing my hours. It's we again, if you've ever been a manager or partner and you've touched 15 files in a single day, or and worked on 15 different engagements, and then at the end of the day you realize you didn't make any notes about how much time you spent in there, and you've just allocated the time out, that's that's not the way you want to do your time. And so it really makes it where I can just work and focus on getting the work done, as opposed and enjoy that, as opposed to being anxious about, well, do I have all my time billing done? Oh, I didn't get my billing done on Friday afternoon before I took off for the weekend. I've got to get it done. I've got to get it done now so I can enjoy Saturday, because I'm so anxious about getting that particular task done. And so now work cuts into my enjoyment of the weekend. Okay, it's not really as much about how much time it cuts into the weekend. It's about how much mind share you have to spend on time tracking and thinking about those kinds of things. It really makes it easier to just let go.
Yeah. And according to Laurel's analysis, they claim on a larger firm that they actually captured an extra 23 billable minutes per day with about a $13,000 uplift per timekeeper in a given year. Now, your mileage may vary, but bottom line is if you make it easier, the ease with Laurel is a pretty big deal. So, Brian, thanks for helping me talk through Laurel for our listeners today. And we'll look forward to seeing all of you again soon in another Accounting Technology Lab podcast.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. We'll be back next Saturday with a new episode of the Technology Lab from CPA Practice Advisor. Have a great week.